I'll never forget the moment my phone buzzed on the table, vibrating slightly on the cold marble. It was just an ordinary evening, a Wednesday, no less, the kind of night that felt like nothing was going to change. I was sitting across from her, the woman I'd spent years with, having dinner at our usual spot, a cozy corner in that little Italian restaurant we'd been to 1,000 times. The dim lighting, the clinking of wine glasses, the hum of conversation around us, everything felt familiar. And then, the notification popped up on my screen. It was an AirDrop request. I tapped it absent-mindedly, thinking nothing of it. I assumed it was just a file from someone nearby, maybe a friend or a fellow diner. I should have ignored it, should have just put my phone back down. But instead, I opened the message. It wasn't a file. It wasn't a picture of a sunset or some random, funny meme like I'd expected. No. It was a video. And it started playing automatically, before I had the chance to stop it. The first thing I saw was her face, unmistakably her. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at someone else, smiling that same smile she'd always saved just for me. But the man she was with was not me. My breath caught in my throat as I watched. Her lips met his, soft and slow, a kiss that lingered far too long, the kind of kiss I'd never seen her give anyone else. The kind of kiss that said so much more than words could ever convey. I felt the heat in my chest. It wasn't just confusion or surprise. It was something far deeper, far more suffocating. I could feel my hands beginning to shake. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't some mistake. This was real, this was happening, and it was happening right in front of me. I looked up at her, instinctively, as if she could somehow feel the air around us shifting. She was still talking, still smiling, unaware of the storm that had just been unleashed in my chest. My eyes moved back to the screen, to that video. I couldn't look away, even though I wanted to. The video played over and over in my mind, the way she kissed him, the way she looked at him, the way she didn't look at me. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront her now? Should I ask her about it? I wanted to scream, but my voice felt trapped somewhere deep inside me, paralyzed by shock. "Are you okay?" she asked suddenly, her voice soft, concerned. I couldn't answer her right away. I couldn't even speak. The words caught in my throat, like they were too heavy to come out. All I could do was stare at her, the woman I thought I knew, the woman I thought I trusted. The phone buzzed again, snapping me back to the moment. Another notification. This time, I didn't look at it. I didn't want to. I didn't need to see any more. But the damage had already been done. The video had already played in my head, like an image burned into my brain. "I'm fine," I managed to say, my voice far too steady, far too calm for what I was feeling inside. "Just a little tired." She didn't seem to notice anything off about my tone, or maybe she just didn't want to. She reached across the table and touched my hand, the same hand that was shaking under the table, the same hand that held 1,000 unasked questions. For a moment, I wanted to pull away, to demand the truth. But I couldn't. I was frozen, caught in the swirl of emotions and disbelief. How could she do this? How could she betray me like this, in front of my eyes, in such a casual, unexpected way? "You sure?" she asked, giving me a soft smile, the kind she always gave when she thought I was upset but didn't know how to ask. "You seem a little off tonight." I wanted to tell her everything, how I wasn't sure what I was looking at anymore, how this video had changed everything, how my world was slipping away piece by piece. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I smiled back at her, not a real smile, but a mask. "I'm fine," I said again, the words empty, hollow. "Really?" She didn't push it. She picked up her wine glass and took a sip, her eyes still on me, watching me, like she could sense that something had shifted but wasn't sure what. I felt the weight of that video pressing on me, threatening to crush me. The restaurant suddenly felt too small, too crowded, and I was suffocating. I wanted to leave, to escape, to run from the truth that was staring me in the face, but I couldn't. I didn't know what I would do next. I didn't know how to deal with this, how to even begin to understand it. I should have asked her right then. I should have demanded answers. But instead, I just sat there, my mind racing, my heart pounding. She was right there, across from me, smiling at me like everything was normal. But it wasn't. Nothing was normal anymore. I glanced down at my phone, and there it was again, the video. Still playing in my mind. It wouldn't leave me. The image of her kissing another man, the way she touched him, the way she leaned into him, it all felt like a betrayal, an explosion of trust that I could never rebuild. "I've been thinking," she started, interrupting my spiraling thoughts. "Maybe we should take a vacation. You know, Just the two of us. Somewhere quiet. Just to get away and reconnect. Reconnect? The word felt like a punch in the gut. How could she talk about reconnecting when I had just seen what I had seen? Maybe, I said, my voice flat. Maybe that's a good idea. But I knew, deep down, there was no going back. She wasn't the woman I thought she was. The life we had built, all of it, was built on a foundation of lies. And I had just seen the cracks. I had just seen everything shatter. And now, sitting there across from her, smiling and sipping her wine, she had no idea that I knew. She had no idea that everything had changed in a single moment, in the blink of an eye. I could feel it then, a deep, gnawing ache in my chest. The air between us was thick with tension, and no amount of wine or polite conversation could fix it. It was already broken. And nothing, not even a vacation, could fix what had been shattered. The waiter returned, interrupting the uncomfortable silence that had settled between us. He smiled, oblivious to the tension swirling around the table, and set down 2 plates of pasta in front of us. The garlic bread was warm, golden brown, and smelled like everything I'd once loved about this place. But now, it all felt so distant, so hollow, as if the very air had changed in the span of a few minutes. I picked up my fork, mechanically, trying to distract myself from the storm brewing inside me. I could hear her, though. The clink of her utensils against her plate, the soft hum of her voice as she made small talk about work. She was talking, but I wasn't listening. All I could hear was that video. Her lips, pressed against his. Her fingers, tracing the line of his jaw. The way she had looked at him, the same way she used to look at me before all of this. I should have asked her about it right then. I should have looked her in the eye and demanded to know who the man was, what the hell was going on, why she'd kept this secret from me. But I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to break the illusion she had so carefully maintained. And so I sat there, pretending to chew my food, pretending to care about the conversation, pretending that everything was fine. But it wasn't. I glanced at her, hoping she wouldn't catch the look in my eyes. Her face was a picture of innocence, a portrait of a woman who didn't have a care in the world. She was beautiful, as always, but I couldn't see her the same way anymore. I watched her lift her glass to her lips, the dim light reflecting off the surface of the wine. She wasn't nervous. She didn't seem guilty. She wasn't even aware that I was slowly unraveling inside. The thought hit me like a cold slap. She had been hiding this from me for who knows how long, and I hadn't seen a thing. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice laced with concern, though it felt forced. The words fell out of her mouth too easily, as if she had said them 100 times before. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in what felt like forever. Was this who she had become? The woman I had once known, the one I trusted completely, was suddenly a stranger to me. How had I missed it? How had I missed all the signs, all the small things that pointed to this? "Yeah," I said, my voice still flat. "Just tired, you know. Long day." She nodded, taking another sip of her wine, but I could see the slight furrow in her brow. She was concerned. But was it for me, or was it for herself? There was a part of me that wanted to end this, to walk out of the restaurant and confront her. To shout, to accuse, to demand the truth. But I couldn't. Not yet. Part of me still wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was an explanation. That this could somehow be fixed. But I knew deep down, it couldn't be. It had already been broken. That's what the video had told me. Her smile, the way she kissed him, how easy it all seemed. It was as though she had been living a second life, one that had no place for me in it. And I had just walked into that life without realizing. Her phone buzzed again, and I couldn't help but glance at it. Her screen lit up for a moment, displaying a text from Babe Red Heart Hash. The name, the emoji, it all made my stomach churn. I could feel the color drain from my face, my grip tightening around the stem of my wine glass. I shouldn't look at it. I shouldn't care. But I did. I wanted to know who Babe Red Heart Hash was. I wanted to know if he was the same man from the video. I wanted to know how long this had been going on. I wanted to ask her all of it, but I stayed silent, my heart pounding in my ears. "Who's that?" I asked, and the question came out much too casually, much too flat. I didn't recognize the number, didn't recognize the name. She looked down at her phone quickly, and then her eyes flicked to mine, her expression softening. "Just a friend," she said, a little too quickly. She wasn't looking at me, her eyes darting between her plate and her phone, like she was calculating her next move. "Nothing to worry about." A friend? A friend who texted her Babe Red Heart Hash? I couldn't stop the bitter laugh that bubbled up in my throat, but I swallowed it before it could escape. I could feel the cracks in my heart getting wider, like a jagged line spreading further with every word she spoke. How had it come to this? How had we come to this moment, where the person I thought I knew and trusted was now slipping away like sand through my fingers? I set my fork down slowly, my stomach tightening. You know, I said, trying to sound like I wasn't about to fall apart, I saw something today. She looked up, her face registering a flicker of concern. What do you mean? I saw the video, I said, my voice cold, almost detached. The one you sent me, the one with you kissing someone else. Her face paled, and for the first time tonight, I saw her stumble. She froze. The mask she'd been wearing cracked for just a second. I didn't mean for you to see that, she said, her voice a little too soft, a little too careful. It's not what you think. The lie was so obvious that I almost couldn't bear to hear it. She had been caught. And even though I had the proof in my hands, I still wanted to believe her. I still wanted to hear the explanation, no matter how impossible it seemed. But there was no explanation. There was only guilt in her eyes. I could see it now, the way she couldn't look me in the eye. The way she avoided my gaze, her lips trembling just slightly as if she was trying to figure out how to make this all go away. Then what is it, really? I asked, my voice low, dangerous now. My grip on the glass tightened. Tell me the truth. She looked down at her lap, twisting her napkin between her fingers, and for a moment, I thought she wouldn't say anything at all. Then she spoke, her voice shaking, barely above a whisper. It was a mistake, she said, but even her words felt hollow. It didn't mean anything. I don't know. I was confused. We're fine, right? I love you. You know that. The words hung in the air, the suffocating weight of them settling around us like a dark cloud. I don't know, I whispered back. The words tasted bitter. I don't know if I can believe that anymore. The truth, whatever it was, had already changed everything. The moment lingered in the air between us like smoke, neither of us able to escape its heavy presence. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say everything I had kept inside for so long, everything I had ignored, pretending things were fine when all along something was slowly breaking. But instead, I sat there, motionless, watching her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Her face was a mixture of guilt and fear, and I saw something else there too, a desperation, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me that everything could somehow go back to normal. I couldn't swallow the lies anymore. The restaurant felt too small now. Too intimate. The soft hum of background chatter, the clinking of glasses, the smell of pasta and garlic bread, all seemed so distant, as though they belonged to a world I no longer inhabited. I wanted to run. I wanted to escape, but there was nowhere to go. The truth had already cornered me, and I didn't know how to face it. I need you to explain it to me, I said finally, my voice breaking the silence like a glass shattering on the floor. I didn't even recognize the person who spoke those words. It felt like they came from someone else, someone who was watching this whole thing unfold, unable to intervene. She took a deep breath, her fingers trembling slightly as she pushed her wine glass to the side. I don't know how to explain it. I don't want to hurt you. But I've been unhappy. For a while. The words hit me like a slap, harder than anything I had expected. The reality of what she was saying, it had always been there, buried under layers of pretended normalcy, but hearing her say it out loud felt like the ground beneath me was collapsing. Unhappy? I repeated, struggling to keep my composure. And this guy, whatever you're doing with him, that's your solution. Her eyes welled up with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. She didn't want me to see her cry. She didn't want to show me how guilty she felt. But I could see it in the way she held herself, as if she was bracing for an impact she already knew was coming. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about us, she said, her voice shaking. I just needed something more. Something I couldn't get from you. I know that sounds terrible, but it's the truth. I've been holding on to this, keeping it inside for so long, and I didn't know how to fix it. I couldn't process her words. I couldn't understand them. My brain was scrambling to find some way to make sense of everything. The secrecy, the lies, the texts, the kiss, and none of it was coming together. I felt like I was losing grip on everything I had believed about her, about us. You needed something more. I repeated, the anger creeping into my voice now. I couldn't help it. My hands shook with the sudden rush of emotion. You couldn't come to me? You couldn't talk to me? We've been together for years, and this is how you deal with it? You go behind my back. She flinched at my words, but I didn't care. I had to say it. I had to make her understand how much this had hurt, how much it had destroyed everything. I didn't know how, she said, her voice quieter now, almost pleading. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you. Well, you did, didn't you? I shot back, standing up from the table before I could stop myself. The restaurant, with all its white tablecloths and soft lighting, suddenly felt like a prison. I needed air. I needed to get away from her, from everything that had suddenly turned into something I didn't recognize. I didn't want to hear her voice anymore, not right now. You've been lying to me. You've been lying to us. I turned to leave, but then I heard her voice, softer now, trembling. Please don't go. I stopped. My hand was on the door, but I couldn't move. Something held me there, even though every instinct in me was telling me to leave, to walk out, to never look back. I wanted to walk away from the mess, from the hurt. I wanted to tell her I didn't care, that I was done, but I couldn't. Please, just listen, she begged. I turned back around slowly, meeting her eyes. She looked so small, so fragile, sitting there in the glow of the dim candlelight. She was the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with everything, and now she was breaking right in front of me, and I didn't know how to fix her. I didn't even know if I should. What do you want me to say? I asked, my voice thick with disbelief. I took a step toward her, still trying to piece together what was happening. What do you want me to do with this information, with the fact that you've been keeping this from me, from us? How do I fix that? How do I fix you? I don't know, she said, tears streaming down her face now, her breath catching in her throat. I don't know. But I don't want to lose you. I don't want us to end like this. She looked so vulnerable, so lost, that for a moment I almost wanted to reach out and hold her. But I couldn't. The trust had been broken, and no amount of apologies or tears would fix that. Not yet. You've already lost me, I said quietly, my voice so small I almost didn't recognize it. I turned and walked toward the exit, my heart heavy, my mind spinning with everything she had just confessed. You just don't realize it yet. I stepped into the cold night air, the harshness of it biting at my skin. The city was alive with lights and noise, but all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing, the pounding of my heart, the shock of it all. I had loved her. I had trusted her. And now, everything felt like it had unraveled in front of me in the span of a single night. The reality of what she had done, what she had kept from me, it was like a fog, clouding everything. And no matter how much I tried to push it away, it followed me, tightening its grip on my chest. I couldn't go back. I couldn't unsee what I had seen. The hardest part wasn't the kiss, or the lie, or the betrayal. The hardest part was realizing that I had given her everything, and in return, she had taken it all and kept it hidden, like some secret I didn't have the right to know. And now, here I was, standing outside the restaurant, feeling like a stranger in my own life. Everything had changed, and I didn't know where to go from here. The walk back to the car felt endless, like each step carried me farther away from something I hadn't even known I had lost. I couldn't remember the last time I felt this disoriented, this betrayed. The night air had a strange coldness to it, as if the world itself had caught on to what had happened and was responding with indifference. I reached the car, my fingers fumbling for the keys in my pocket. My mind kept replaying the look in her eyes when I left her there, sitting alone in the dim light of the restaurant. That look, it was a mixture of desperation, regret, and confusion. She wanted to fix it, but she couldn't, not now. Not after everything. I slid into the driver's seat, feeling the familiar leather beneath me, but it was like the car was a foreign object now. Everything felt foreign. Everything felt like it had shifted while I was too caught up in the illusion of normalcy to notice. I stared ahead, my hands gripping the steering wheel. My mind was a blur. I wanted to call her, scream at her, beg her to explain, but I knew what that would lead to, more lies, more confusion, more tangled words that wouldn't mean anything. They wouldn't take back what she had done. I glanced at my phone, and the notification I had seen earlier was still there, just like a scar, waiting to be picked at. Babe Red Heart Hash, it was still fresh, still taunting me. Was it him? I knew it was him. I knew who it was. I had no doubt now. That text was the final nail in the coffin. I could feel it in my gut, the sickening confirmation that she had been hiding something from me for so long. How long had she been seeing him? How long had she been living this double life? I hit the steering wheel, the sound of my frustration echoing in the stillness of the car. I was angry, yes, but more than that, I was hurt. I felt like I was crumbling from the inside out, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. A thought flashed through my mind: maybe I should just go home. Get some sleep. Maybe it would make everything clearer. But I knew that wasn't going to happen. There was no clarity waiting for me in the morning. No magic reset button that would take me back to the way things were. I started the car, the engine roaring to life, and drove aimlessly. The city passed by in a blur of lights and shadows, but none of it felt real anymore. It was like I was in a dream, walking through a version of my life that had already been ripped apart. I didn't even know where I was going. All I knew was that I couldn't go back. Not yet. Not until I could figure out how to make sense of the mess she had left behind. By the time I reached the park, it was past midnight. The streets were empty, the world quiet, as if it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I pulled into a quiet corner of the park and turned off the engine, staring out the windshield at the moonlit path that wound through the trees. It was peaceful here. The kind of peaceful I didn't want right now. My mind was anything but peaceful. My heart was a battleground, torn between the love I had once felt for her and the rage that burned through me now. How could I not have seen it? How could I have been so blind? I closed my eyes, trying to calm the storm inside me. But all I saw was her face. Her smile. Her laugh. All the little things I had once taken for granted, now twisted and distorted by the reality of who she had become. I reached for my phone again, scrolling through the text messages, the photos, the calls that had piled up in the past few days. It was all there. She had been hiding it from me, keeping it hidden like a secret she thought she could keep forever. And maybe she thought she could, that I would never find out, that I would never question the things that didn't add up. But now, all those little things, the late nights, the odd comments, the way she acted around me, they all made sense. Too much sense. I stared at her number for a long time before I made a decision. I wasn't going to text her. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of any more of my attention. What was the point? What could she possibly say that would fix this? I didn't call her either. That would only drag me back into the mess, into the game she had been playing. I wasn't going to fall for it. But I couldn't help myself. My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment longer, my mind a whirlwind of confusion, before I tapped out a message. We need to talk. Now. There. It was done. I hit send and then tossed my phone aside, as if somehow, physically removing it from my hands would stop the nagging feeling in my chest. But it didn't. I sat there in silence, staring at the dark park in front of me, trying to steady my breath, trying to find some sense of control in a situation that felt utterly out of control. What the hell was I doing? I didn't know anymore. All I knew was that I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't pretend it wasn't happening. This thing, this mess, had to be confronted. I had to face the truth, even if it shattered me in the process. After a few minutes, my phone buzzed. It was her. The words on the screen were simple, but they cut through me like a knife. Please don't hate me. I stared at the message for what felt like hours, my heart racing again, my mind spinning. I wasn't sure if I hated her yet. But I knew one thing for sure: things would never be the same. I wanted to feel anger, to feel rage. I wanted to yell and scream and throw things, to make her feel the same pain I was feeling. But instead, I felt an emptiness. A hollow pit in my stomach. Because no matter how much I wanted to fight it, the truth was clear. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, was gone. And in her place, all I was left with was a stranger. I typed back, my hands shaking slightly as I did. You don't get to ask for that. Not after what you've done. I hit send and stared at the words on the screen, feeling the weight of them settle in my chest. But the feeling of the weight didn't stop the shaking. It just made it worse. I put my phone down and leaned back against the seat, closing my eyes for a moment. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and yet I couldn't find a way to rest. The silence of the night pressed in around me, and for the first time in a long while, I felt completely, utterly alone. And that hurt more than anything she could have ever done. The screen lit up again, the vibrations in my hand causing a ripple of dread in my chest. I hesitated before picking it up, as if the phone itself might bite back. But the reality was already gnawing at me, sinking its teeth into my ribs, into every breath I took. There was no going back now. No pretending it wasn't happening. I stared at her message, the words blurred for a second as my vision wavered in the aftermath of everything that had been said, everything that had been uncovered. I never meant for this to happen. I don't know what came over me. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white with the force of my hold. I was angry, but not in the way I expected. There wasn't the burning rage I thought would be there. Instead, it felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into a chasm that was swallowing everything I knew. I read her words again, as if they might mean something different the second time. But they didn't. I never meant for this to happen. Of course she hadn't. Because when people hurt others, they never mean to. It was always an accident. Always a mistake. Always something that happened in a moment of weakness or confusion. But those words, I never meant for this to happen, they didn't fix anything. They didn't undo the hurt. They didn't change what had already been broken. I could feel myself shutting down, slowly. The emotions, anger, confusion, sadness, were all pouring into one tight knot inside me, suffocating every ounce of clarity. I stared at the screen, reading her message over and over until I almost couldn't see anything else. I don't know what came over me. Those words stung more than anything else. Because I knew exactly what had come over her. She had come over herself. Her desire, her own needs, her own selfishness. She had put herself above everything, and in doing so, she had destroyed what we had built. I wasn't sure how much time passed, but the buzzing in my hand startled me back to reality. Another message. Please. Please just talk to me. I didn't know if I could. I didn't know if I could look her in the eye and pretend like nothing was wrong. For so long, I had convinced myself that our relationship was a fortress, that nothing could break us. But this? This was a breach I didn't know how to mend. Even the smallest crack in the foundation felt like a rupture now. I could feel the walls crumbling around me, and I didn't have the energy to hold them up anymore. She had made her choice. And in doing so, she had handed me mine. I typed back slowly, deliberately. I needed to make sure the words carried weight. You don't get to ask for that. Not after what you've done. I sent it, and then, with a kind of numbness I couldn't shake, I set my phone down again. This time, I didn't pick it up. I didn't care about the responses, the apologies, the explanations she was likely crafting at that very moment. Because it was too late. The damage had been done. The park was still quiet when I left the car. The night was suffocating in its stillness, and I walked aimlessly, not really sure where I was going. I could have gone home, but the thought of walking into that empty house, the place where everything used to feel safe, made me nauseous. So instead, I just walked, letting my feet carry me, one step after another, in search of something, anything, that might bring me back to a reality that made sense. But I knew deep down there was no going back to the way things were. What had happened could not be undone. The moonlight reflected off the path as I walked further into the park, the silence louder than any words. I thought about her, about the woman I thought I knew, the woman who was suddenly so different, so distant. I thought about everything we had been, everything we had shared. The moments of laughter, the inside jokes, the way we used to talk about the future. Those moments felt like they belonged to someone else now. Someone I didn't know. Someone I had imagined into existence, not realizing I was the one living in a dream. Now, it was all shattered. I couldn't go back to her. I couldn't pretend like this was something I could get over. Maybe with time, the pain would dull, the sharp edges would smooth over, but right now, I could barely breathe. The cool air felt like it was suffocating me as I leaned against a tree, eyes closed, taking deep, slow breaths in an attempt to calm the storm inside. But the silence was deafening. It was so loud in my ears that I thought I might explode. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to scream at her. Why didn't you just be honest? But what good would that have done? What could I possibly have said or heard that would have made a difference? I stayed there for what felt like hours, though I knew it couldn't have been that long. The weight of everything pressed down on me, sinking me into the ground with every passing second. I didn't know how to get out of it. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't even know how to feel anymore. I reached for my phone again, half expecting it to buzz with some kind of response. But there was nothing. It was quiet. Too quiet. I put the phone back in my pocket and stood up straight, staring out into the park as if somehow, by sheer will, I could change my circumstances. But I knew better. I knew this wasn't something that could be fixed by a late-night conversation or a quick apology. This was something deeper, something harder to erase. I left the park in silence, still unsure of where I was going. My mind was a storm of unanswered questions. And when I finally did get home, I couldn't bring myself to go inside. I stood in front of the door, staring at the darkened interior, the quiet stillness that awaited me beyond it. Everything had changed. And I didn't know how to move forward from here. But I knew I had to. I knew I had to let go of the life I thought I had, the one I had believed in, the one I had clung to for so long. Because now, it was nothing more than an illusion. A memory of something that was never as real as I wanted to believe. And so, with that realization, I turned my back on the door, on the house, and on everything that had led me to this point. I was walking away. But it wasn't just from her. It was from everything I had once believed to be true.